Hello YouTube. Bane666 here. As most of you probably know, I started this series of videos to expose the lie that Elliot Rodger was connected to the men's rights movement. But I am now expanding it to cover any falsehoods, misconceptions, misinformation, or outright lies spread about the M.G.M. So let's get stuck into it. Hello YouTube. Let's continue with Kevin Logan's The 10 Worst Lies Spread by the Men's Rights Movement. We are up to number 6. So let's get stuck into it.
Number 6.
Male circumcision is as bad as female genital mutilation.
You'll note straight off that Kevin refers to male genital mutilation as circumcision, yet refers to female genital mutilation as female genital mutilation. Now personally, I think either circumcision or genital mutilation are acceptable terms, as one is a medical description of the act, and the other is the result of that act. But what I've often seen with feminist ideologues like Kevin, is that they will use the more acceptable, and less emotional term for males, while using the more emotion-driven term for females. This is done on purpose to downgrade the severity and importance of one, while increasing the severity and importance of the other. And it's fucking dishonest. Be consistent with your terminology, Kevin. I don't think that's too much to ask. And for the record, I'm against all types of genital mutilation, male or female, and think that all forms of circumcision should be banned on individuals under the age of consent, if there are no medical grounds for the procedure. But let's examine the claim before continuing with Kevin's video. Is male genital mutilation as bad as female genital mutilation? Now before continuing, I should point out that either of these can result in death, but for the sake of argument I'll be comparing the procedures, and not the worst-case scenario. According to the World Health Organization, there are 4 types of female genital mutilation. So let's have a closer look. Type 1, partial or total removal of the clitoris and/or the prepuce, clitoridectomy. When it is important to distinguish between the major variations of Type 1 mutilation, the following subdivisions are proposed. Type 1a, removal of the clitoral hood or prepuce only. Type 1b, removal of the clitoris with the prepuce. Now there is a major difference between Type 1a and Type 1b. The equivalence of Type 1b would be not only removing the male foreskin, but the head of the penis as well. This is clearly worse than male circumcision. But what about Type 1a? The removal of the clitoral hood is equivalent to the removal of the male foreskin. In fact, it's less harmful, as the male foreskin has many thousands more nerve endings than the clitoral hood.
Males and females develop from the same embryological tissue. They have 2 possible pathways that tissue can develop in, and males go down one path and under the influence of testosterone, and females go down the other without testosterone. And yes, most embryologists would say that there are distinct analogues between the two. The labial tissues, for instance, are said to be the analogue of the scrotum, and of course the penis itself has its analogue in the clitoris. The foreskin has its analogue also in the female. There is a female foreskin, the clitoral hood. The difference is that, and this is one of the great mysteries of anatomy, is that the male has the nerve endings arranged differently in the female to the male. So, now for many years people thought that was the only real specialization that had occurred, that it was a leftover of this process of zipping all the skin up as it was developed. But now we realize that this amazing concentration of nerve endings is related to that frenulum, and from the frenulum, draping away to each side, is a band of ridges, folds in the skin, which John Taylor has called the ridged band. There are about 11 or 12 ridges, and they are very similar to the ridges on the fingers, on the fingertip, and they run right round the entire diameter of the penis and rise up into the frenulum, and they enclose in the inner foreskin a delta, a triangle of skin which we've called the frenula delta, below the frenulum, which is exquisitely innervated, and most men know this as their own G-spot, the spot that is the most sensitive area of the penis. In that area, in the ridged band and in the frenula delta, we have the same specialist nerve endings that we have in the fingertip, only we have probably 10 times as many, I would believe. The number hasn't been accurately counted yet, but the number of nerve bundles that wire them up is known, and it's very impressive. So the foreskin is undoubtedly the main sensory unit of the penis. When it is removed, you remove at least 50% of the sensory capacity. So the effect is devastating to the the sexual capacity of the organ, as has been well known for centuries.
So far we have one version of type 1 which is more harmful, and one version of type 1 which is less harmful than male circumcision. But let's look at the other types. Type 2, partial or total removal of the clitoris and the labia minora, with or without excision of the labia majora, excision. When it is important to distinguish between the major variations that have been documented, the following subdivisions are proposed. Type 2A, removal of the labia minora only. Type 2B, partial or total removal of the clitoris and the labia minora. Type 2C, partial or total removal of the clitoris, the labia minora and the labia majora. I think it's pretty clear that all forms of type 2 could be considered worse than male genital mutilation. Let's move on to the next type. Type 3, narrowing of the vaginal orifice with creation of a covering seal by cutting and appositioning the labia minora and or the labia majora, with or without excision of the clitoris, infibulation. Type 3A, removal and apposition of the labia minora. Type 3B, removal and apposition of the labia majora. Type 3 is clearly the worst type of female genital mutilation, and therefore can be considered worse than male genital mutilation. Let's have a look at the final type. Type 4, all other harmful procedures to the female genitalia for non-medical purposes, for example, pricking, piercing, incising, scraping and cauterization. So I guess this is an other category. Some of which could be considered worse, some equivalent, and some not as bad as male genital mutilation. Now this last one is an interesting category. You'll note the word piercing in the list. This has led to an interesting redefinition of what is and is not F.G.M. From the Telegraph. Got a vaginal piercing? According to the NHS, you're a victim of F.G.M. The NHS will now record a woman with a pierced labia or clitoris as having undergone female genital mutilation, following guidance from the World Health Organization. Crazy, right? But let's continue. Women with vaginal piercings will now be classed as victims of female genital mutilation, F.G.M, under new NHS rules. F.G.M is an illegal practice where women and girls' genitalia are cut or mutilated in the name of tradition, religion and culture. But now any woman whose clitoris or labia has been pierced, even if it was entirely her own decision, will be seen as an act of F.G.M. Clearly, someone should not be forced to have their genitals pierced, but it is fucking crazy to class adult women, who willingly have their genitals pierced, victims of F.G.M. While at the same time it's perfectly legal for newborn baby boys to be mutilated against their will. Next. The new reporting regulations follow guidance from the World Health Organization. Most F.G.M involves either partially or totally removing the clitoris, labia or narrowing the vaginal orifice by repositioning the labia. But piercings would come under a fourth type defined as all other harmful procedures to the female genitalia for non-medical purposes, for example, pricking, piercing, incising, scraping and cauterization. A Department of Health spokesperson said, while there are challenges in this area and adult women may have genital piercings, in some communities girls are forced to have them. The World Health Organization has quite rightly defined this as a form of F.G.M. We are taking every precaution to record genital piercings that have been done within an abusive context. The new data collection will help build a picture of the scale and the nature of the problem we are facing. We are continually working on ways to improve and develop the NHS response to this terrible practice. I think it would be easy to determine which genital piercings have been done in an abusive context. Obviously, if an adult woman, of her own free will goes to a piercer, and willingly pays money to get the procedure done, it's not in a fucking abusive context. Isn't it also interesting that they don't consider male circumcision, done on infants against their will, to be abusive? Next. The move comes as a group of MPs have called for designer vagina surgery to also be classed as F.G.M. A Home Affairs Select Committee released a report that said, "We cannot tell communities in Sierra Leone and Somalia to stop a practice which is freely permitted on Harley Street." The MPs want a 2003 F.G.M law to be changed so that it specifically outlaws cosmetic surgery such as labiaplasty, where a woman's labia are trimmed for aesthetic purposes, as a criminal offense. And the lunacy continues. Now, personally, I think anyone who undergoes labiaplasty, for non-medical reasons, is crazy. You could consider it the height of narcissism. But I have that opinion of many unnecessary plastic surgery procedures. But having said that, I respect an individual's right to do with their body as they please, provided they are an adult, of course. If they want to modify their vagina, get breast implants, have penis implants, split their tongue, or get a second nose on the back of their head, it's entirely their choice to do so. Their body, their choice. But I find it utterly amazing that so much concern is given to the free choices of adult women, while so little concern is given to newborn boys who are circumcised against their will, every single day. Where is his body, his choice? Next. At the moment the phrasing on this issue remains ambiguous. In the UK, around 137,000 women and girls have been affected by F.G.M and more than 20,000 are thought to be at risk each year. Campaigners have raised concerns that the new NHS rules could skew these figures and present an inaccurate picture of F.G.M in the UK. I think the last sentence is very important. And I have to wonder if this broadening of definitions isn't an attempt to make the issue seem larger than what it is. 137,000 girls being genitally mutilated in the UK is a horrific number, but let's compare that to the large number of males who have legally been circumcised. Why not simply ban both? So to sum up, yes, there are some forms of F.G.M which are far worse than M.G.M, but not all are worse. In fact, with recent changes to the definition of F.G.M, even adult women undergoing a legal procedure of their own free will are considered victims of F.G.M. So why not simply ban both being performed on individuals, of either sex, who are under the age of consent, if there is no clear medical reason? Both are harmful, both are unnecessary, yet only one is illegal. Where's the equality in that? Next.
Now this is again another tactic they'll use to try and derail the conversation about F.G.M.
You know, Kevin, I'm glad you brought up the derailing argument. Because it's something as an MRA I often see when talking about male genital mutilation. It tends to go a little like this. If you are talking about M.G.M, and you don't spend at least, if not more time talking about F.G.M, then you are told you are a misogynistic women-hating shitlord. Yet conversations about F.G.M are only ever allowed to be about F.G.M, and anyone who brings up M.G.M is a misogynistic women-hating shitlord. Funny how that works, isn't it? Let me give you an example of a conversation I took part in some months ago on one of my videos. Melanite X said, "From what I've seen, the MRA seems to only be concerned with white male, never with anyone else, especially black males. At least feminists give a shit about people of color." To which I replied, "The sentencing gap affects black men more than white men, but it does affect all men. Circumcision also isn't race-specific. In fact, I've talked about what the World Health Organization is doing in Africa numerous times, which is very much an issue for black men. Parental rights is also an issue which is not race-specific. Suicide, homelessness, workplace deaths, all non-race specific. So by all means go ahead and point out to us just one issue that is white male specific." Of course you can't. and then Deborah Sinata jumped in on the conversation with, "Ever heard of female circumcisions? Not exactly the same, as it involves removal of the clitoris, ensuring that the woman will never have an orgasm. This, along with other female genital mutilation, like sewing vaginas shut so that men can penetrate them more pleasurably when they take them as virgins. Thought you might want to jump on this idea. Oh no, I had committed heresy by mentioning M.G.M without spending equal, or more time speaking about F.G.M. Hey, maybe I should have just ignored Melanite X's comment about black males completely, and just talked exclusively about F.G.M as an answer to his comment. Okay, so let's be honest here, this type of shit is done by both sides, and sometimes it is appropriate to say, hey, what about the other side, and sometimes it's not. Next.
They'll type, "You talk about F.G.M but you never talk about circumcision. You talk about F.G.M but you never talk about circumcision." But there are very important and distinct cultural and medical reasons why the two things are not the same. Firstly, circumcision is done not to degrade or undermine the sexual impulses of boys.
Actually, that's exactly why it was introduced into the West. From J.H. Kellogg, Plain Facts for Young and Old, Embracing the Natural History of Hygiene and Organic Life, 2nd edition, Burlington, Iowa, 1888, Plain Facts, pages 294 to 296. 2. Masturbation. In younger children, with whom moral considerations will have no particular weight, other devices may be used. Bandaging the parts has been practiced with success. Tying the hands is also successful in some cases. But this will not always succeed, for they will often contrive to continue the habit in other ways, as by working the limbs, or lying upon the abdomen. Covering the organs with a cage has been practiced with entire success. A remedy which is almost always successful in small boys is circumcision, especially when there is any degree of phimosis. The operation should be performed without administering an anesthetic, as the brief pain attending the operation will have a salutary effect upon the mind, especially if it be connected with the idea of punishment, as it may well be in some cases. The soreness which continues for several weeks interrupts the practice, and if it had not previously become too firmly fixed, it may be forgotten and not resumed. Infibulation. Through the courtesy of Dr. Archibald, Superintendent of the Iowa Asylum for Feeble-Minded Children, we have become acquainted with a method of treatment of this disorder which is applicable in refractory cases, and we have employed it with entire satisfaction. It consists in the application of one or more silver sutures in such a way as to prevent erection. The prepuce, or foreskin, is drawn forward over the glands, and the needle to which the wire is attached is passed through from one side to the other. After drawing the wire through, the ends are twisted together, and cut off close. It is now impossible for an erection to occur, and the slight irritation thus produced acts as a most powerful means of overcoming the disposition to resort to the practice. Dr. John Harvey Kellogg not only invented the cornflake, but was largely responsible for the introduction of circumcision in the West amongst non-Jews and non-Muslims. His motivation was clear: to stop young boys from masturbating. Now let's be clear here, Dr. Kellogg knew of the negative aspects of circumcision, for example. It is doubtful, however, whether as much harm as good does not result from circumcision, since it has been shown by extensive observation among the Jews that very great contraction of the meatus, or external orifice of the urethra, is exceedingly common among them, being undoubtedly the result of the prolonged irritation and subsequent cicatricial contraction resulting from circumcision in infancy. Yet he still recommended it to cure masturbation amongst boys. But don't worry, he had a cure for female masturbation as well. In females, the author has found the application of pure carbolic acid to the clitoris an excellent means of allaying the abnormal excitement, and preventing the recurrence of the practice in those whose willpower has become so weakened that the patient is unable to exercise entire self-control. The worst cases among young women are those in which the disease has advanced so far that erotic thoughts are attended by the same voluptuous sensations which accompany the practice. The author has met many cases of this sort in young women, who acknowledge that the sexual orgasm was thus produced, often several times daily. The application of carbolic acid in the manner described is also useful in these cases in allaying the abnormal excitement, which is a frequent provocation of the practice of this form of mental masturbation. So let's have a quick look at the history of circumcision in the West. 1832. Claude François Leilman circumcises a patient to cure him from nocturnal seminal emissions. 1845. Edward H. Dixon declares that circumcision prevents masturbation. 1855. Jonathan Hutchinson publishes his theory that circumcision prevents syphilis. 1865. Nathaniel Heckford claims that circumcision cures epilepsy. 1870. Louis A. Serre publishes a paper proving that circumcision cures epilepsy. 1870. Louis A. Serre declares that circumcision prevents spinal paralysis. 1871. M.J. Moses declares that Jews are immune to masturbation because of circumcision. 1873. Joseph Bell announces his discovery that circumcision cures bedwetting. 1875. Louis A. Serre declares that foreskin causes curvature of the spine, paralysis of the bladder, and clubfoot. Really? At least the bladder is connected to the penis through the urethra, but how could anyone seriously think that the foreskin causes curvature of the spine and clubfoot? Crazy. 1879. H. King discovers that circumcision cures nocturnal emissions and abdominal neuralgia. 1881. Maximilian Landesberg announces that circumcision cures eye problems that he believed were caused by masturbation. 1886. William G. Eggleston declares that foreskin causes crossed eyes. 1888. John Harvey Kellogg promotes circumcision as punishment for boys to discourage them from masturbating. 1890. William D. Gentry declares that circumcision cures blindness, deafness and dumbness. 1891. Jonathan Hutchinson declares that foreskin encourages boys to masturbate. 1893. Mark J. Lehman demands immediate implementation of mass circumcision of all American boys. 1894. P.C. Remondino says circumcising blacks will help prevent them from raping whites. Hold on, what the fuck was that one? 1894. P.C. Remondino says circumcising blacks will help prevent them from raping whites. Wow. Let's continue. 1894. H. L. Rosenberry publishes paper proving that circumcision cures urinary and rectal incontinence. 1898. T. Scott McFarlane says he has circumcised as many girls as boys, and always with happy results. 1900. Jonathan Hutchinson advises circumcision as way to decrease the pleasure of sex, and hence to discourage sexual immorality. 1901. Ernest G. Mark notes that the pleasurable sensations that are elicited from the extremely sensitive inner lining of the foreskin may encourage a child to masturbate, which is why he recommends circumcision since it lessens the sensitiveness of the organ. So even over 100 years ago, the importance of the foreskin and its link to sexual pleasure for males was known, and was in fact one of the reasons given for circumcising. 1902. Roswell Park publishes paper proving that foreskin causes epilepsy and that circumcision cures it. 1914. Abraham L. Wolbars claims that circumcision prevents tuberculosis and demands the compulsory circumcision of all children in America. 1915. Benjamin E. Dawson says that since the clitoral hood is the source of many neuroses, female circumcision is necessary. 1918. Bell Eskridge concludes circumcision will relieve one of the greatest causes of masturbation in girls. 1926. Abraham L. Wolbars claims that circumcision prevents penile cancer. 1930. Norton Henry Bear claims that he has cured a boy of epilepsy by circumcising him. 1934. Aaron Goldstein and Hiram S. Yellen invent and mass-market the Gomco clamp, which makes it easier for doctors to cut off even more skin than in traditional circumcisions. 1935. R.W. Cockshut demands that all boys be circumcised in order to desensitize the penis and promote chastity. And before everyone comments, yes, it's ironic that the guy's name is Cockshut. But let's continue. 1941. Alan F. Guttmacher promotes mass circumcision as a means of blunting male sexual sensitivity. He also spreads the false claim that a baby's foreskin must be forcibly retracted and scrubbed daily. 1942. Abraham Ravitch claims that circumcision prevents prostate cancer. 1949. Eugene H. Ann declares that circumcision prevents venereal disease and cancer of the tongue. Cancer of the tongue? Seriously? 1949. Douglas Gardner points out that the previous year's cases of infant circumcision deaths were not necessary, given the lack of medical justification for circumcision. So 66 years ago there were people pointing out that male infant circumcision was unnecessary and dangerous, yet here we are today still debating it. 1951. Abraham Ravitch invents claims that circumcision prevents cervical cancer in women. 1953. R. L. Miller and D. C. Snyder unleash their plans to circumcise all male babies immediately after birth while still in the delivery room, to prevent masturbation and provide immunity to nearly all physical and mental illness. Wow, it stops masturbation and cures nearly all physical and mental illness. Almost sounds too good to be true. 1954. Ernest L. Whitner claims that male circumcision prevents cervical cancer in women. 1956. Raymond Creelman invents the circumstraint which straps down and immobilizes the baby's arms and legs. 1958. Compare MacDonald says the same reasons that apply for the circumcision of males are generally valid when considered for the female. Well, isn't that interesting, Kevin? I hope you are taking notes. 1959. W. G. Rathman finds that among the many benefits of female circumcision is that it will make the clitoris easier for the husband to find. 1966. Masters and Johnson claim that there is no difference in sensitivity between penises with and without foreskin. 1969. Morris Fishbein calls for circumcision to prevent nervousness and of course also masturbation. So we are up to 1969, almost within my lifetime, and we are still hearing the masturbation excuse. At this point in the timeline, this excuse has been used for over 100 years, yet no one seems to have figured out that it's bullshit. 1971. Abraham Ravitch claims that circumcision prevents cancer of the bladder and the rectum. Although I don't believe it to be true, I can kind of understand the bladder cancer claim, as the bladder is connected to the penis. But rectum cancer? Really? 1971. The American Academy of Pediatrics Committee on Fetus and Newborn issues a warning to the nation that there are no valid medical indications for circumcision in the neonatal period. So this warning was issued 44 years ago, yet male infant circumcision is still routine in places like the U.S., and is being heavily promoted in Africa. 1973. R. Dagger, Melvin Seltzer, and Jack Lapides declare that anyone who disagrees with their agenda to impose mass circumcision on America is deluded. 1975. The American Academy of Pediatrics Task Force on Circumcision declares, there are no medical indications for routine circumcisions and the procedure cannot be considered an essential component of health care. So it's safe to say that we have known for 40 years now that there is no good reason for routine circumcision, yet it's still legal, promoted and commonplace in many areas. 1976. Benjamin Spock, after recommending circumcision for 30 years, revises his best-selling parenting book, I strongly recommend leaving the foreskin alone. Parents should insist on convincing reasons for circumcision, and there are no convincing reasons that I know of. 1985. Thomas E. Wiswell claims that circumcision prevents urinary tract infections. And this is something we will hear again and again, as it's become a common excuse. 1986. Aaron J. Fink claims that circumcision prevents AIDS. And here is another claim we hear again and again these days, I'll get to this one later. 1988. Aaron J. Fink invents the falsehood that circumcision prevents neonatal group B streptococcal disease. 1989. Under the direction of Edgar J. Schoen, the American Academy of Pediatrics Task Force on Circumcision declares circumcision is necessary. 1991. Edgar J. Schoen tries and fails to convince European countries to institute mass circumcision. 1991. Aaron J. Fink declares mass circumcision is necessary to prevent sand from getting into the soldiers' foreskins, and presumably to stop them masturbating, to stop the black ones from raping the white ones, and to create immunity to all known mental and physical disease, right? Oh yeah, it cures clubfoot as well. 1996. J.R. Taylor finds that the average amount of amputated foreskin was nearly half of the total penile skin. 1997. Edgar J. Schoen tries and fails once again to convince European countries to institute mass circumcision. 1997. Janice Lander discovers that circumcision without anesthesia is traumatic for babies. Note, before this, almost all infant circumcisions were done without anesthetic due to the prevalent belief among circumcisers that babies are not capable of feeling significant pain, and if they could it doesn't matter since they won't be able to remember it. This is interesting, since Kellogg way back in 1888 wrote, the operation should be performed by a surgeon without administering an anesthetic, as the brief pain attending the operation will have a salutary effect upon the mind, especially if it be connected with the idea of punishment, as it may well be in some cases. The soreness which continues for several weeks interrupts the practice, and if it had not previously become too firmly fixed, it may be forgotten and not resumed. If any attempt is made to watch the child, he should be so carefully surrounded by vigilance that he cannot possibly transgress without detection. If he is only partially watched, he soon learns to elude observation, and thus the effect is only to make him cunning in his vice. So it would seem that not only was the fact it was painful known over 100 years beforehand, but that was one of the very reasons it was done. I have to wonder at what point medical professionals convinced themselves that the practice was painless, if they ever really did. 1998. Howard Stang, inventor of an upright circumcision restraint, fails to mention this conflict of interest in his article promoting infant circumcision. 1999. J.R. Taylor, after studying the foreskin's specialized innervation, concludes that it is the primary erogenous tissue necessary for normal sexual function. 1999. The American Academy of Pediatrics Task Force on Circumcision, after reviewing 40 years' worth of medical studies, concluded that the potential medical benefits of newborn male circumcision are not sufficient to recommend routine neonatal circumcision. This report is also the first time the AAP has acknowledged, after decades of doctors mindlessly repeating the belief that babies don't feel significant pain, that circumcision without anesthesia is traumatic, and if circumcision is to be done, anesthesia should be used. 2002. W.K.Nam extends the storage life of specialized cell cultures derived from freshly harvested neonatal foreskin tissue. Note, since the 1980s, some amputated infant foreskins have been sold without the knowledge of the parents to biomedical companies for research and even use in commercial cosmetic products such as anti-wrinkle creams. 2003. Edgar J. Schoen steps up pressure on American Academy of Pediatrics to reverse its policy on circumcision, claiming that circumcision prevents AIDS. 2005. R.Y. Stallings finds that HIV rates are significantly lower in circumcised women. Note, there was no WHO call for mass female circumcision to help prevent AIDS. Well, that's interesting, don't you think, Kevin? Mind you, even if the findings were legitimate, which I doubt, it still wouldn't be an excuse for female circumcision. But it is a clear case of someone trying to excuse it using medical studies, which is exactly what we find with male circumcision. 2007. R.C. Bailey ends his study early with the conclusion touting circumcision as a vaccine that prevents HIV infection. Note, this and other similar studies were widely reported throughout the American media. 2007. L. DeWitt finds that Langerhans cells found in the foreskin are a natural barrier to HIV infection. Note, this and other similar studies were widely ignored throughout the American media. Interesting, isn't it, that in 2007 one study claims that circumcision prevents the transmission of HIV, while in the exact same year another study came out claiming that having a foreskin helps prevent the transmission of HIV. The interesting thing though, regardless of which study is correct, is that they both claim to only reduce the chances of transmission to males. Females, or males receiving anal sex, are just as likely to contract AIDS regardless of whether their male partner is circumcised or not. A more logical, common-sense approach would be to use condoms, thus protecting both partners. And it doesn't require cutting anyone's body without their consent. Or an individual can choose to have it done once he is an adult. 2007. M. Sorrells tests the relative sensitivity of the penis and finds that the foreskin is the most sensitive part of the penis and the glans is the least. So in the history of circumcision in the West, we find that there have been excuses based on sexual taboos, most likely influenced by religion, excuses based on faulty medical findings, and the ever-present, "it's cleaner" argument. All these excuses have been used to justify both male and female circumcision, yes, even the cleanliness argument. Mentioning some of these benefits, Dr. Hamid Al-Ghawabi says, "The secretions of the labia minora accumulate in uncircumcised women and turn rancid, so they develop an unpleasant odor which may lead to infections of the vagina or urethra. I have seen many cases of sickness caused by the lack of circumcision. Circumcision reduces excessive sensitivity of the clitoris, which may cause it to increase in size to 3 cm when aroused, which is very annoying to the husband, especially at the time of intercourse. Another benefit of circumcision is that it prevents stimulation of the clitoris, which makes it grow large in such a manner that it causes pain. Circumcision prevents spasms of the clitoris, which are a kind of inflammation. Circumcision reduces excessive sexual desire." Amazing how these modern-day pro-female circumcision claims resemble pro-male circumcision claims of the last 150 years in the West. Don't you think it's time we stop the bullshit excuses and just ban it all? Next.
Also, the science suggests that there are actually medical benefits to removal of the foreskin.
Yes, and the so-called science says the same thing about female circumcision. 2005. R.Y. Stallings finds that HIV rates are significantly lower in circumcised women. Stallings found this by looking at the data from the Tanzania HIV/AIDS Indicator Survey. So let's look at those findings. As you can see, the rate of HIV infection amongst uncircumcised women is much higher than amongst circumcised women. It should also be noted that the same study shows that circumcised men aged 15 to 29 and 45 to 49 have a higher rate of infection than uncircumcised men in the same age brackets. Of course, this is all circumstantial, and shouldn't be seen as reliable, just like the other studies making the same claims. But the point is, junk science and bias studies can be used to justify both female and male genital mutilation. If Kevin opens the door to discussing one, then he opens the door to discussing the other as well. You cannot make the claim that studies supporting F.G.M are all junk science and are only trying to justify a cultural practice, and then turn around and ignore the same argument concerning junk science and M.G.M. Let's simplify this, shall we? No one should have their genitals cut without their consent. But if you are an adult, and you believe that circumcision reduces the risk of contracting STDs, then by all means feel free to go get circumcised. Your body, your choice. But don't try to force it on others against their will, based on either junk science or cultural practices. Next.
That being the reduction in the potential for urinary tract infections and possibly even the transmission of sexually transmitted diseases.
Oh no, not the dreaded urinary tract infection. Whatever shall we do? It's not like someone could go to the doctor and get a simple course of antibiotics. Oh, hold on. Actually, it is exactly like that. And without the need to butcher newborn babies. Kevin's argument here, taken to its logical conclusion, would mean, as a society, we should forcibly require everyone to undergo an appendectomy. After all, more people die from a burst appendix than getting a UTI. And why aren't we forcibly removing women's breasts? After all, think of all those women who die of breast cancer every year. Or don't you care about the lives of women, Kevin? Of course, all these are stupid arguments, as is Kevin's. To put it simply, the risks outweigh the possible benefits. So what are the risks and the negative effects of male circumcision? well, the most extreme risk is death, either through blood loss or infection. But I guess those babies won't be getting UTIs, right, Kevin? But what about more common side effects? From acquisition of erectile dysfunction from circumcision. A new study in the International Journal of Men's Health shows that circumcised men have a 4.5 times greater chance of suffering from erectile dysfunction, ED, than intact men, revealing what appears to be a significant acquisition vector. Researchers Dan Bollinger and Robert S. Van Houw, M.D., M.S., FAAP found a strong association between circumcision and ED in their survey of 300 men. What other studies support this finding and what could be an underlying cause? 18% of adult American men, 3/4 of whom are circumcised, have ED, affecting 18 million men. Circumcision's role as a risk factor may be reflected in ED drug sales. While the United States represents 5% of the world's population, it also accounts for 46% of Viagra sales. Other studies have previously observed that circumcision's damage results in worsened erectile functioning, inability to maintain an erection, and reducing the gland's sensitivity, including an overall penis sensitivity reduction by 75%. A recent study discovered that premature ejaculation is 5 times more likely when adjusted for erectile dysfunction and circumcision. A new Danish study also found that circumcised men are 3 times more likely to have sexual dysfunction. Case studies of men circumcised as adults are revealing, since they compare sexual function and satisfaction before and after the surgery. They are also alarming. Circumcision was supposed to correct a problem, ostensibly resulting in entirely favorable outcomes, but this is not the case, as these failure rates illustrate. In one such study, circumcision worsened erectile function and decreased penile sensitivity, and 38% reported sexual harm. Another survey found that 27% of recently circumcised adult men reported dissatisfaction with their erectile functioning. In a third study, the number of men reporting erectile dysfunction almost doubled after circumcision, and ED severity increased, too. A fourth before and after study found that 35% of participants had a worsened sex life after circumcision and that their partners had a 46% reduction in satisfaction. The study implicated loss of nerve endings as a reason, addressed below. The true dissatisfaction rate is probably higher than these failure rates since all of the men elected circumcision, and would naturally be biased toward the outcome being beneficial even when it wasn't. An exhaustive case study of 5 impotent men circumcised as adults involved giving them complete physical and laboratory examinations, including thorough examination of genitalia, neurological examination, complete blood counts, oral glucose tolerance tests, and protein-bound iodine and T4 uptake, serum electrolytes, VDRL, sperm counts, and 24-hour urinary ketosteroids and hydroxysteroids tests. None of these test results were significant, and in the end, circumcision was the only common factor. And then there are the emotional issues. Memory starts before birth and newborn infants have fully functioning pain pathways. One would expect, therefore, to find psychological effects associated with the painful genital cutting operation. Post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, is a normal response to an abnormal event. Neonatal genital cutting is an event in which a newborn infant experiences extreme levels of pain, terror, and helplessness, so it fulfills the criteria as a psychogenic for PTSD. Levy 1945 reported that children experience behavior problems, such as night terrors and a fear of nurses and doctors, after surgery, including circumcision. Kensever 1965 tested boys before and after circumcision and reported that the ego seeks safety in total withdrawal. Levy found their symptoms to be similar to combat neurosis, now known as PTSD. Taddeo et al. 1997 studied the behavior of babies at first vaccination. They found that circumcised boys have a much stronger reaction to pain of vaccination than do girls and intact non-circumcised boys, which the authors suggested is an infant analog of PTSD. Other authors also have reported PTSD in circumcised males. Reinhardt 1999 reported 4 cases of PTSD secondary to neonatal circumcision in middle-aged men that he encountered in his psychiatric practice. Ramos and Boyle 2001, reported PTSD in 70% of Filipino boys who experienced ritual circumcision and 51% of Filipino boys who experienced medical circumcision. So on one hand we have infants with PTSD, loss of sensation, increased likelihood of erectile dysfunction, possible penis amputation due to infection or the procedure being done incorrectly, and possible death due to infection or blood loss. But on the other hand, it decreases the likelihood of getting an easily treated UTI. Oh, but hold on, that's not even correct, because circumcision doesn't actually decrease the likelihood of getting UTIs. You couldn't even get that one right, Kev. As for STDs, the studies are just as bad. Use condoms, that way both partners will be protected. And in fact, people like Kevin, who claim circumcision helps prevent the spread of STDs, are actually helping spread STDs, as people who believe they are naturally protected, are less likely to use condoms. I mean, just have a look at this chap who recently commented on one of my anti-circumcision videos. Wow, who knows what nasty things this guy has living in his pants. Oh, and one more thing, circumcised men are less likely to want to use condoms due to their already decreased sexual sensitivity. Just buy some fucking condoms, and stop mutilating babies, okay? It's the better option for everyone. Next.
Also, there are instances of boys being born with foreskins that are too tight and it makes urination very painful. So obviously in those cases, it is medically necessary. There is no occasion upon which F.G.M is ever medically necessary.
Just because there are some cases where male circumcision may be medically necessary, it does not excuse all the cases where there is no medical necessity, yet it is still performed. For example, if someone is born with a cleft palate, they may require corrective plastic surgery. But if a doctor went around needlessly performing this type of surgery on normal healthy babies, they would be put behind bars. As for Kevin's claim that this type of corrective surgery is never done on females, well, what can I say? Once again, Kevin is full of shit. Labial adhesions, also referred to as labial agglutination, are a common disorder in prepubertal females. They are a fusion of labia minora and in the midline, are usually asymptomatic, and typically can be treated conservatively. Labial adhesions must be differentiated from other pediatric vaginal or urethral disorders and imperforate hymen or acetate vagina. They most commonly occur between 3 months and 3 years of life. If medical care does not result in separation of the labia minora or if urinary retention or UTIs are present, manual or surgical separation may be considered. Next.
For those who don't know, female genital mutilation is the act of, at the very least, the removal of the clitoris.
Incorrect. As we have already covered, not all types of F.G.M involve the removal of the clitoris.
Almost always without any anesthesia or sterilization of equipment.
Which are the exact same conditions that male circumcision is performed under in those same communities. It's also a good way to spread AIDS if mass circumcisions are being performed.
And in some instances it actually involves the removal of the entire outer genitals and the sewing up of the vaginal opening, allowing for a very, very small hole through which they have to urinate and release period blood. Also, in a lot of instances, this hole is not big enough, so you get a backlog of period blood and urine and it backs up into the system, and you often get very, very severe medical problems. Not to mention the psychological and mental problems that come with having your genitals hacked away at.
Once again, this is no different for males.
Also, I think it's worth mentioning at this point, because the M.R.M is full of all stripes of bigots, that it isn't actually just a Muslim problem, because there is no holy book which commands that you have to do this. Largely, female genital mutilation is actually an African problem.
Oh, okay. So calling it a Muslim problem makes you a bigot, but calling it an African problem doesn't. I wonder, does Kevin think that Indonesia is part of Africa? Having witnessed his logic so far, it wouldn't surprise me. So just let me state for the record, I don't care if you are Muslim, Jewish, Christian, atheist, or 3/4 Satanist and 1/4 Cocker Spaniel. And I don't care if you are Caucasian, African, Asian, Hispanic, Arab, Persian, Aboriginal, or otherkin. Unless there is a clear and evident medical reason, you shouldn't be cutting the genitals of anyone underage, male or female. It's that fucking simple. I'm all for respecting cultural diversity, but that respect stops where an individual's basic human rights begin. But of course, Kevin, the class act that he is just using all this to have another dig at the M.G.M. Next.
That meaning that you have African Christians, African Muslims and African tribespeople who do this. It's a disgusting practice aimed at removing a woman's sexual libido. Now, if you want to look for allies with people who are against circumcision, you need look no further than feminists. Feminists like me and many others that I've talked to who are against male circumcision for non-medical reasons as well.
And in the past, I have given full credit to feminists like Lacey Green, who have openly spoken out about male genital mutilation. But not all feminists are against it. And to be fair, neither are all men's rights activists. But on the other hand, I can think of anyone in the West who is pro-female circumcision. Which is why M.G.M needs to be openly discussed. I recently saw feminists show their anger at an advertising campaign in the London Underground, even going as far as to make bomb threats. What a shame they don't seem to have similar passion and compassion for the baby boys being mutilated in hospitals every day. I don't doubt that many, maybe even most feminists are against M.G.M in principle, but what a shame their silence is so deafening. With their help we might actually be able to get something done. Next.
If you wish to derail discussions about female genital mutilation with fucking strawmen bullshit arguments about how bad circumcision is, then all I have to say to you is fucking stop. You are misguided, you are wrong, and downright despicable.
That's funny, Kevin, because that's exactly how I feel about you. Anyway, that's it for another episode, folks. Until next time, don't drink the poison Kool-Aid.
Yes, Germaine, I'd like to ask you a question about honour killing. Every year at least 5,000 women and girls are honour killed by their own families for violating the restrictions on female sexual freedom imposed by Islamic culture. In your book, The Whole Woman, you defended the practice of female genital mutilation as a legitimate facet of cultural identity. And you've also justified your failure to speak out against honour killings on the grounds that it's very tricky to try and change another culture. What good would it be for me to go over there and try to tell them what to do? As an outspoken advocate of women's sexual rights over the past 40 years, why are you hiding behind cultural relativism and condemning and not condemning the murder and mutilation of women?
Well, I have never, ever defended honour killing. Never. To mix that up with the question of female genital cutting is dishonest, frankly. I have never confused those two issues. Now, when it comes to cutting your own body about, there are lots of things that go on that I think are fairly revolting. I think piercings are probably fairly revolting, depending on where they are. I'm not a great fan of tattoos either. But I would never dream of telling people who are disfiguring a perfectly beautiful human body with bad drawing that they have no right to do that. Now, when it comes to female genital cutting, one of the commonest operations with newborn girls in the United States is clitoral reduction, because it is believed that the girls are over-endowed with a clitoris. We do interventions at all stages of development of genitalia, in males and in females, because we think there's something abnormal or wrong or unacceptable or ugly or something about them. We actually have operations going on now that cost a huge amount of money, where women are having their vaginas packed with fat from other parts of their bodies in order to make them tighter, narrower, and generally more entertaining to the opposite sex. And they pay a lot of money for this, and there's no law that says they can't do it. We never, ever have troubled ourselves to find out why female genital cutting became a practice in North Africa. It's got nothing to do with religion.
Has it got something to do with sexuality and male fear of women's sexuality? Because that is what's often stated.
Yes, I know. But it's actually women who do it to other women. And when I've been on the ground in places like Ethiopia, where it's practiced by the Amhara community and the Oromo community, and possibly even the Jewish community, when I've actually asked the men if they notice the difference between women who are sub-incised and women who are not, they don't actually know what I'm talking about. They've never actually looked. It is not something that comes from them. And in fact, I'm not an expert on this, and I am very embarrassed to have to even talk about it because it's actually none of my business. But I feel that it is a cosmetic operation. And nowadays, in the United States, women of Afro-American descent whose inner labia, they think, project too far between the labia majora, they will have them reduced. It's a very common operation.
Can I just say, I mean, it seems if we're going to have this is a very complicated set of issues because many, many things are called circumcision. Many, many different practices. There's a huge difference between cutting a nick in the labia and clitoral excision, removing the whole clitoris, right? And these are all called circumcision. So first of all, you have to decide which of these practices you want to talk about. Then you have to figure out why they're being done in the communities where they're being done. I think there are places where it is pretty much explicitly connected with the regulation of female sexuality in the minds of some people, because I've heard, for example, Southern Sudanese men say this, that the trouble with uncircumcised women is that their sexuality is unbridled and you can't satisfy them.
They make too much noise,
yes,
is what they say.
Yeah. So, I mean, so you have to figure out what...
But Germaine, can I just interrupt there, Germaine? If it were the case anywhere that was a fact, that was the reason for female genital mutilation, including clitoral excision, would you be against that, naturally?
Look, this is just a bit too difficult. Clitoral excision is fairly rare. And what was discovered by many surgeons working in the United Kingdom is that, in fact, the clitoris was beneath the labia. They'd been closed over it. Now, you have to ask how people have sex. That's a question that comes into it. One of the problems that the World Health Organization has had with women in Africa is that they prize a dry, tight vagina, which makes them much more susceptible to infection. And so they've been trying to persuade women that this is not a good idea. They make themselves more susceptible to HIV infection, for example, if they do this kind of thing. We can't really adjudicate in this. If our own sexual health was so fantastic, the rest of the world could copy it.
To go back to the original question, you can adjudicate in your own country when the practice is made illegal, as it is in Australia and Britain, can you not?
Well, that's interesting too, because if you don't allow it to be done in the right circumstances, with the right equipment, if you're actually sending it back home. Now, you know, imagine that we say, for example, made male circumcision illegal, which we could do. Well, then we're going to send it back into the villages, having people doing it, having amateurs do it. I think it's got to be, in the end, the client's demand. And what we have to deal with is that.
I'm just going to go. I've got a hand up there in the third row. We'll get a microphone over to you. But sorry, Anthony, continue.
Well, I just think that you can't. I mean, you have to make a judgment yourself about whether it's something that you think is right. that's separate from the question whether you think there's any intervention that you could make to do anything about it. But first, I think, and in order to make that judgment, you have, I think, at least to do two things. One is to distinguish between the very many different things that we're talking about here, as you rightly did, and the other is to try and figure out what it's doing in the culture. So in order that you can figure.
Can I just say
there is one thing
I'd like to actually hear.
There's one thing we can be sure of.
Briefly.
That when foreigners become very anxious for you to stop doing something, then that practice accumulates value.
Well, I mean,
this is what happens with
just
the
to get back to
Malmo.
what I said before, we're not talking about foreigners here when we're talking about people who've become Australian or become British. Australians, other Australians in their law that are asking them not to do this. But I'll go to Sefi.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Well, as an African woman, I think some of the rhetoric tends to be reductive and